first. Recording is in progress. Okay, because I think it's important first to obviously learn about a status report. This is something that students from 5YOC on up receive. And it's something that also the high school students receive as well. And you guys will probably receive these. You received your status reports before winter break. And it really just updates you on how your student's doing. And I'm going to cover each kind of individual section of it so everyone is clear on what those kind of titles actually delineate. So up at the top here, once again, screen sharing, you'll have like the date of birth, the date of entry from when your child actually began to attend this school, your student ID, when the student ends up leaving the school, what school year it is, your homeroom, and maybe your date. This is an actual student's transcript, which is why some of these things are blacked out. Next, you'll look at the success orientations, and that is for each quintile. There are 7 different success orientations, and you'll have that key there that shows you exactly what those are, either an E for exemplary, S for success, and N not yet. Then we'll move over to attendance. Attendance is also shown on these status reports, and that's for each quintile. You'll see how many days they're present, days absent, and times tardy. So that is something that students and parents will be able to see after you receive that status report. Down here is the cumulative totals. That is totaling up how many success orientations you were either successful in or exemplary. This student obviously was a little untrustworthy at times and so received 2 N's for not yet. Hopefully in the future, they learned a little bit more trustworthiness. Then we go to the competencies and knowledge. This will show each individual class that a student is taking. So you'll start off with the course. So here we'll have, art, cultural studies, literature. And the student, I believe, was in 12 YOC. Then we'll have the unit number here. So that is what the unit is and the title of that unit. Next, we look at maybe periods or week. Can anyone tell me what this number means? Any ideas?
Well, it says there are periods per week. So.
Okay, yeah, so that is how many times or periods, right? Because we're in a block schedule, it's a little confusing. So each block actually counts for 2 periods. So you can see that with the block schedule, maybe you have class Monday, Wednesday, and then you have Friday advisory. So that equals 2 on Monday, 2 on Wednesday, and then your last additional one on Friday. So they're actually in that class 5 periods a week. Then you'll see that this class is only for 2 periods a week. And that is because fine arts and PE are generally separated. They're both in the same block. So you only are in each one half the time. And then on Fridays, because of advisory period, that last class in the block gets canceled out and they don't attend that class on Fridays. So they never attend, PE and fine arts on those Fridays. So that is why they only have 2 periods a week. They're actually in attendance with fine arts here. And that directly correlates to how many credits they receive in a class, which we'll go over later on. As you realize, a class like English or math, it's out of 10 units. But your fine arts is going to be a little bit less than that because you don't go to that class as often. Therefore, you cannot receive as many credits later on. Then you'll go to that teacher, the date engaged. So when that unit actually started in the classroom, and then the date mastered. As you can see, you'll have you'll have from the date engaged, date mastered, so this, how long it took your student to actually master that unit. For some students, it can take a lot longer and some a lot shorter. And then you'll have your evaluation, like how long that actually, what grade you actually received. Then we'll move over to your status report here. In this key here on this bottom, this will show schools and you what each one means. So the A means you had a higher level of mastery, right? You received an A, that is the highest rating at the school. B, you mastered all the units. However, you did not show that you demonstrated like noteworthy achievement. P, you'll see a lot of P's generally in the middle of the year, which means that unit is still in progress. Hold is when the unit is basically the student's not currently active or engaging in that unit. It is on hold for a very specific reason, generally worked out between a teacher. Maybe you transferred into the school in the middle of the semester, or you had pressing medical issues. It's possible to put that on hold. D is when you show no effort, basically. It is when the student is not actually kind of engaging with the material and working with the teacher to master those units. And then W is a withdrawn. Now, you'll generally only see a W if a student maybe transfers out in the middle of the year. You'll get a W on that, or you leave the course, which you might see in high school. Okay, so that is a status report. Next, we're going to go look at the transcript. And before we look at all the transcripts, can anyone tell me, for this past one was of that middle school student we just saw, why there are no classes listed on the transcript? Does anyone know why from that last student we just saw? It's kind of a trick question. We'll see. So there are actually no, oh, do we have any ideas? Oh, Ms. Haberman, do we have one? Oh, she's muted, but.
I think that student's elementary, and there's no transcript for an elementary student. Is that right?
That is correct. So what you'll see is that transcripts are only for students engaging in high school credit. So you will not see any classes taken in middle school or elementary school unless there are, however, very specific classes that would show up in your transcript, which is why there is a pre-secondary section here. And we'll give an example of that a little bit later on. Okay, so now we're going to go into actually the transcript. So what does your transcript show? It'll show your attendance, your GPA, the classes you took, the grades you received, and then some demographic information. So as you can see in this student's transcript, what we're looking at here, you'll have the student name, date of birth, nationality, when they enrolled, when they withdrew from the school. Here you'll look at total QSI, their GPA. And that GPA is an average of all the courses they took at QSI for a grand total of their total QSI credits. Now, in each section here, you'll see each grade level. So pre-secondary, this student did not take any courses that would suffice for actual high school credit. But then you'll look at secondary 1 and the main courses that they took. Now, for most of your core classes, it's out of 10 credits. You'll see that sometimes a student might receive a little bit less than 10 and sometimes a little bit more than 10 if they were really advanced in that class. So you're looking at something like literature 2 here. This student got 9 credits. So at some point later on, that student is going to have to make up that 10 credits because it is a required course. You have to have 10 units eventually. So this student in particular, that literature 2, if we follow it from this year, no literature 2, no literature 2 in the secondary 3. And then secondary 4, the student needed to close out these extra units they never accomplished. So you'll actually see that literature 2 in about the middle there. Where he got 1 unit. And so he got his maximum of 10 that he needed. Now, on each bottom here as well, you can look at your days absent. So when you're applying to universities, they're going to see basically how many days this student is in school and not in school, right? Now, this is really important because all the universities see when you send this transcript in is basically classes you took, right? Your GPA and your attendance. These are 3 big things that those universities are looking at. If all else is equal and you have an application with a student who attends school all the time and a student who maybe has missed 100 days of school in 4 years, you're going to pick that student that actually attends classes because you're going to see they're committed and that they're actually invested in their education. And I know there are some maybe situations where students are absent quite often. However, that is not something that generally colleges take into account unless there are really, really kind of exemplary reasons why. So we'll look at those days absences, and then we'll look at that GPA. Now, the worst GPA you can get in QSI is that B, right? So you'll see that that is the lowest grade that a student can actually receive is a 3.0 GPA, and the highest is a 4.0. So looking at this student right here, you'll see that they mostly were at the lower end of the spectrum there. This student is sitting at a 3.14 GPA average. So that is one of the worst GPAs you can almost get at this school. Now, a university, they're going to receive a profile that basically shows and states exactly how our GPA system works. So they're going to receive that and see that student did quite poorly or did the bare minimum at our school. Then you'll look maybe at the average for the next year, a 3.1, followed by a 3.14 in his secondary 3-year, and then finalizing with a 3.39 his last year of school here. Generally, as a rule of thumb, universities want to see that you are on an upward curve, right? So if you start off school at a 3.14 and you end at a 3.39, you've actually, gone up a little bit. Now they want to see that you're doing a lot better. So if your student does, for some reason, do a little bit poorly their first year, it's okay. They want to see that this student is learning those skills necessary to perform well in university. And that shows that they are maybe getting better study habits. Maybe they're coming to school a little bit more frequently. However, if they see that a student is starting off at a 4.0 their secondary 1 year, and then they end around a 3.2 their last year, they're going to maybe see that kind of trend line and realize that maybe this student is going to be doing a lot worse in university. So maybe that they're not necessarily as ready for university as they should be. So as long as you're improving or staying the same at a really high level, that's exactly what the universities want to see. Last off, you can see just by looking at it, the student has a whole lot more courses listed in that secondary 4 class. And that's because he's making up all those missed units. Now, a school is going to see that and realize that the student did not actually finish all of his courses or units in those secondary 1, 2, and 3 year. Even though you were able to still do well in this school and show mastery over all those units, a school is going to see that it might have taken you a few more years to reach that mastery level. And that generally is not going to look as good as a student who has done the required units every single year. And it just kind of looks sloppy at the end, seeing this many classes. And it's going to be really difficult to explain to those admissions representatives when you kind of give a reasoning as to why you have so many classes lumped together at the very end. So hopefully you guys have noticed by now that this is an example of a rather poor transcript. And I'll give you guys another example of another poor transcript right here. So this will give us an example also of those pre-secondary courses. Now, this student was rather advanced in French, and then as most of you hopefully know, if you have older students, technology in your pre-secondary and 13 YOC counts as a high school course. Now, you'll look at that GPA there as well. So this student at a 4 technology units, they received a 3.25. Is that awful? No. Is it great? No. Something that's really important for you guys to realize now is that when you average out that GPA at the very end, your total QSI GPA, in that GPA, a technology course is worth just as much as a calculus course or an AP physics course or any highly rigorous course. When that GPA is all averaged out, it is worth exactly the same amount as those other courses. So you really need to make sure you're doing as well as humanly possible in these maybe easier courses early on, because that average works out as the same exact equal weight. So if you might not do as well, maybe one of these more rigorous courses, your GPA can still look very high if you make sure you're getting that 4.0 in those easier classes. So it's important to realize now that in 13 YOC, your classes really do have an impact on your total QSI GPA later on. So just keep that in mind for your student. And when you receive these notices, if your student's going to be in 13 YOC, they send home a email that you guys need to sign notifying you that you guys understand that this is a high school class for high school credit, and that this will, impact your student's GPA. As you can see, this student also, as a rule of thumb, did rather poorly. The total QSI GPA was a 3.3. As I said before, a 3.0 is the absolute lowest score or GPA you can have in this school, and the 4.0 is the highest. So this student was rather on the bottom end. This student, days absent are not so horrible. They were actually in school quite a lot, which is a good thing. Universities will see that and realize that the student might not be doing that well, but they're showing up to school quite often. However, that last maybe year there, they had 19 absences, and their GPA more or less stayed the same, especially from secondary 2 to 3. So this student was not as much of a high achiever as they could be, but they didn't do horribly, I would say. However, you'll look at all those courses kind of lumped in at the end, and you'll see that the student had a lot of units to make up, and that's also looking quite sloppy. You'll look at these courses transferred. So if you do transfer or transfer in from another school, or maybe you take classes at another school over the summertime, when those classes, when you're given credit for them at QSI, they'll come in as transfer credits, which will be bolded in the bottoms, and you'll see there what the grade they got and the credits they received. Before we move on, are there any questions about anything we just discussed?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Just about absence. So if somebody has gone to quarantine or off with COVID, is that marked as absent?
So I will let
in school?
Ms. Haberman or Katie answer their questions there
Okay.
on the absences.
Hi, if they're doing work online, no,
Hi.
we do not count them as absent.
Okay, great. All right, good. Great, thank you very much.
Mhm.
And that's exactly why it's important that these students, even when they're virtual, these teachers are still taking attendance in their classes. So if the student isn't showing up during these virtual lessons, the teacher is going to mark these students absent. So make sure that you guys are staying in contact with your teachers, communicating with them, and submitting these assignments. If you take a few day hiatus, it is an absence. And you got to look at it this way. I mean, people get sick, but being sick is not really an excuse all the time, because we all get sick. It's unfortunate, but that's what universities look at. Are you going to hire an employee that is sick 30 days of the year, or an employee who's sick 1 day of the year? It's just about how well they're going to do and how often they're going to be in attendance at their school. So they're looking to see that.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, I meant to ask.
Sure.
So if a student didn't test positive until about 3-4 days afterwards, are those 3-4 days minus of their absence number?
So I would say in most situations, probably yes.
Okay.
If it's something you get in contact with the nurse, and they were maybe still talking and submitting assignments during that time and communicating with their teachers, it can be flexible. But if they maybe for 4 days you haven't heard a peep from them, and then they test positive, it might be a little bit more inflexible.
No, that's fine. Great, thank you very much.
Okay, I have a
Okay.
question.
Sure.
That's the question about the GPA. It says on all the transcripts and the things we receive, it says QSI GPA. Is this
Correct.
just GPA, or is QSI GPA calculated in a different way, or is it the same GPA as?
So QSI GPA is unweighted, and maybe you've seen that. So this is the total GPA at our school, and it says QSI GPA because when they transfer in, that credit is not the GPA of maybe a transfer class or transfer, course that they took at another school. So you're looking at that 4.0 unweighted GPA. You've maybe seen in public schools in the US or even in Canada, where it might be weighted where they have an A+ might be a 5.0. So this is just showing that that is our GPA at our school.
So what is weighted? I'm sorry.
So weighted means it kind of accompanies plus and minus system. And it's a system of grading. It's a little bit different. Here, if you get a 4.0, that's a 4.0. But at other schools, if you get an A+, it could equal a 5.0. It's not something we do and not something a lot of schools do, but it does happen in some situations.
Can I comment on this too?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Irina? So also some schools in the US, but not all, grade all AP courses on 1 through 5. So that would be considered a weighted GPA, but the universities know, like when we send our stuff, that we don't use the weighted system, but a lot of places don't. So QSI
No,
doesn't.
it's not a problem. I'm trying to understand because they keep saying GPA everywhere, but here it says QSI GPA. So I was trying to.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the university basically is going to see what kind of system of evaluation the school has been using, right?
Yeah.
So they're
Exactly.
gonna, okay.
We'll send a profile basically with all applications that the schools receive, and it clearly states our grading system, what our GPA is out of, just how the QSI system works in general, and they'll receive all that information. So they, and oftentimes, I mean, they've experienced this before, so the admissions representatives are going to understand the system. However, in some cases, if they're not familiar with it, that's why it's accompanied by a kind of a fact sheet where they can check and make sure they understand what they're looking at.
Thank you.
So this student, this is an example of maybe a better transcript. You can see total QSI GPA is a 4.0. That is the highest GPA they can receive at our school. You'll also see that in this pre-secondary, this student was advanced in math. So they moved up while they were in middle school. So they took algebra while they were 13 YOC. So they got out of 10 points and they got a 4.0. That's going to be in their average when they graduate into their total QSI GPA. And you guys can just take a look and you'll see that the transcript looks a lot cleaner. They don't have a lot of random 1 credits. Maybe they didn't finish in other classes. They'll have maybe a few here and there, but as a whole, it's looking pretty good. And you can see that GPA just on those lines is 4.0. The universities can clearly, easily, accurately tell what this student did and how they did it. And you look at those days absent, you'll notice the student basically had a flawless attendance rate. Showing that you have not missed a single day of school throughout a year is a really great, prestigious achievement. Not many people can say that they didn't miss a single day of school or work in a year. Universities will see that and they'll be like, hey, that kid's pretty dedicated. Even if they weren't feeling so well some days, they still maybe decided to make it to school. And then you'll see some transfer credits as well. The student took macro and micro at VHS, which is a virtual school that students in our school still use. If we don't offer a certain AP course, they have the ability to take that course at one of those schools and then transfer that credit in and then sit for the AP test. Okay, and just here's another example of a fairly good transcript. You'll see the student also received a 4.0. And it's basically just showing you kind of examples of these different kinds of transcripts. This was more for students. I was showing them kind of different examples and they had a lot of questions. Oh, I'm getting a knock at the door. 1 second. Sorry, I had to give some locker accommodations to Miss Kairos. Okay, so hopefully you guys got a good look at this. Maybe I'll mention just APs here real quickly. As you can see, the APs are clearly delineated with that AP sign. These transcripts, they won't have whether that student received like a certain grade on these AP exams. Those AP exams will be sent directly to those universities. So the college will at least know you took the AP class, you did well in it. However, they won't know what score your student received in those AP exams until you send those over. And then this is kind of just a comparison between the two. It looks a little sloppy. I had to try to fit them both into the page. But you can see just right off the bat that the student with the 4.0 and those classes, it just looks a lot cleaner and easier to read. You can see those days absence clearly. And so if you were like an admissions representative, you can pretty much make a very clear and obvious choice of which student you would maybe enroll in your school based off of these transcripts. Because you have to really think about the only thing that these admissions representatives see are your student's GPA, your attendance rate, maybe the name of the student, and their application essay. Everything else is basically non-existent. So you really need to make sure that you're standing out as well as possible. And many students all over the world, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of students who are going to have a 4.0 GPA and going to have just as good of a transcript as anyone else. So there's very few differences in picking which child that they're going to admit into their university, especially in those more selective schools. So that's where attendance is really going to come into play. You're going to look at those admissions essays, and that's about it. So it's really important to realize that there are really very few things that is going to make your child stand out when they're eventually applying to schools. Okay, and then last but not least, who will see these transcripts and status reports? So if your student for some reason ends up transferring, when that student transfers in maybe middle school, they don't have a transcript to receive. So those schools are going to see those status reports. That is basically the transcript we'll send into that school, accompanied by a few forms where they ask maybe the counselor and their subject teachers to review their performance and fill out a different kind of sheet. And I have a copy of one of those I will show you guys. So for students who are transferring in middle school, they will just see that status report accompanied by that form. And that's basically what that school is going to have to go off of to see whether or not to admit your student, what classes to place him in, and how well he's done in the past, or she. And then the universities you apply to are going to see those transcripts as well. And then just real quickly, I'll give you an example of that. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so this is like an example of a reference form that a school might send us. Basically, this is the counselor recommendation form. At the bottom here, you'll kind of start seeing please check boxes, and they'll ask me different questions about the student. Has the student ever been referred to your school's learning support services? Does it so that your child's received special education services? I'm getting another knock at the door. I apologize. Okay, thank you. And these are just different kinds of questions they'll ask the counselor. For teachers, it'll look a lot different than this. Students shows respect towards self, others, and belongings. These are things where we have our success orientations for a reason. Hopefully we are instilling these values upon the students early on. So I'm always able to say, always, of course, and I can always glance back at those success orientations and see, did the student receive an N? Did he receive an S or an E, right? And judging by those, I can give them circles if I might not know the student as well as I should. So those will be questions like this. Then there's a question on academic skills. Oral literacy, mathematics, and it kind of just varies. And it's basically up to me to say what my opinion of this student is. And teachers have a very, very similar one. So these are the two forms, these main forms, basically your transcript or status report, and this maybe review sheet that you or a teacher will submit to one of those schools. And almost every single school functions just about the same and has very similar questions. So with that, are there any questions involved in anything I just talked about? I guess we're just about hit our time limit. So
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Is it a problem if you are transferring schools in high school? Because, no?
No, not at all. It makes absolutely no difference.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question.
Sure.
Before we were receiving information, and at the start of the school year, also the students received these kind of like tracking charts where they had their courses listed, how many credits they have, kind of to track their progress and plan ahead. And here it says there's three kinds of diplomas: general, academic, and academic with honors that you can receive
Sure.
in QSI, right?
And then
So
also the
I
AP
remember I
capstone
had this
as
big.
well. But we also have the AP capstone diploma now as well.
Oh yes,
but
yes.
yeah.
So I had this before, but I somehow lost it. I would like to have specific information. What courses and how many credits are required for each kind of diplomas,
Section
or
like your math, your English,
yes,
sure.
which courses, for example, next year, if he plans whatever APs he wants to take or whatever, which courses are required of him to be taken in secondary 3, and which he maybe he already has that science, he doesn't need to take just simple science anymore. You know what I mean? So this kind of thing.
Of course I do.
Prerequisite.
1 second here. I'll show you. Let me see what I can pull up really quickly, and then I will send you out some information on that as well. Sure. Okay, I do have a link for that really quickly. Okay, so this is a little bit old, but I'll send you the one when I find the other one. So as you can see, they have the general diploma, academic diploma, and then academic with honors. The academic diploma with the 2 years of full AP course. So basically, you only need 2 years, two AP classes to receive that academic diploma with honors. You only need a maximum of 240 credits plus 10 electives. And that's something that is very easily done. I can go back and show you maybe one of these transcripts, but all the students end up with quite a lot of credits. Let me share that again really quickly for you. So just
Michael, while you're doing that for the AP capstone diploma, because that one's not listed on there, don't they need 5 or 6 AP classes?
So they need 5 APs followed by the AP capstone, which is that research and seminar class.
And they also have to pass all the tests with at least a 3, I think. Yeah, they can't just take the class. They also have to pass the AP exam to get the diploma.
So as you can see, like this student, total QSI credits 328. So this student technically, passed the 240 mark by a mile, right? Even the students who didn't do very well, 255, they still passed 260. They need at least 240 to get just that academic diploma. But as you can see, it's something that's very easily done. And the students that are, higher excelling students, they generally get all their credits by the time they finish their secondary 3 year. And I'll send you that form out myself as well. And if anyone else would like a copy of that, I would be happy to send that.
Yes,
Maybe we can add the capstone diploma like on there.
Yeah, this is an older form.
Yeah.
There's an updated form somewhere on SharePoint. I got to go do some searching. Any additional questions?
Yeah, can I ask a question? Quick.
Sure.
You mentioned that at certain YOC the students can take, I think it's algebra and geometry, I believe, something like that. Are they counted for the high school credit? Is that as I understood? And if it's right, who makes this decision? Can the student just make a decision, and is it the teachers who allows them to do that, or how does this work?
So,
and what does it do in the end? Is it that if they take a 13 YOC, so it's once they are in a high school, so it's just easy, it takes the loads off, or what happens?
Sure. I can go back into that one sheet I just showed you guys, and I'll explain it with you. So you'll see in this math section here, for that academic diploma, you need 30 credits of math. That is 3 math courses. One of them has to be algebra, one of them has to be geometry, and the other one can be from these electives. Now, a student will be in algebra their 13 YOC year if and only if they are advanced in their class. So if it is an 11 YOC student and they are taking 12 YOC math, when they are in 13 YOC, the next step is algebra. So they have to be in algebra. However, if they are at grade level in math, and he's a 12 YOC student in 12 YOC math, in 13 YOC, he will be in 13 YOC math. When they eventually go to high school, some students, it is quite frequent that they might double up in math. They might take algebra and geometry their secondary 1 year. Secondary 2, they could take advanced mathematics 1, secondary 3, advanced mathematics 2, and then their secondary 4 year, they could take AP statistics or AP calculus.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? Well, all right then. If Ms. Haberman or Holmquist have anything else to say, I suppose we have concluded our coffee.
All right, well, thank you, Michael. That was great, super informative. And maybe what we should do is we can post it in the Eagle Beat. So, all right, well, we just want to thank you all for coming to our parent coffee. And in the next month or 6 weeks, we'll hold another one on a different topic. All right.
Great.
Have a great day,
Thank you very
Thank you,
everyone.
much.
Michael. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye.
That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.